Guys, Bitcoin is once again towards the end of the bear market. This is the time to really pay attention. And if you want to make profits, this is important. I'm going to discuss the also potential interest rate hikes, the liquidation levels, which is basically telling us that Bitcoin can probably go a bit lower. We're going to discuss the Wyckoff model for the first time, and I think it pretty much correctly predicted and will predict what will happen to Bitcoin and many assets. So let's start with Bitcoin here. I want to firstly, let me actually change the line to this. It will just make it simpler to see what's happening. And essentially we can see that last cycle in the bear market, we formed this kind of falling wedge pattern, which we broke out to in the upside. Same thing is kind of happening right now, which if we play out more, will probably bring us to the bottom here around $52,000 or the low 50s, right? And also have a look at this. So this is the last two cycles for Bitcoin. 2018, we had basically a low here in June, end of June, and then we had a pump in July, and then the top out somewhere end of July, beginning of August, we had the top out, and then a final drop to the downside capitulation event and the bottom of the bear market. Let's look at the last cycle. So they had the bottom somewhere here in June. You can see the dates at the bottom of the screen, somewhere in June. July was a pump to the upside, and then we had the peak somewhere end of July, beginning of August, final push to the downside, and that was it. And I think the same thing is gonna happen now. I mean, look, we had the bottom here end of June. July will probably have that pump, and then the end of July, beginning of August, we'll peak out somewhere here in like 67 to $70,000, have that final capitulation event, final move down. Everyone says we're going to zero, and that's of course when you find the bottom, when you want to be buying Bitcoin. And you can see the same thing right here. July is usually very bullish. These are the monthly returns for Bitcoin. You can see July only historically had 4 negative months, and you can see average return 7.63%. Right now we're already at about 8% returns. I think we can go higher. Let's also dive into the bear markets, because we're in a bear market right now, right? We're in a bear market, and we only really want to look at what happened in July in the bear markets, right? Like these bear markets. And I just said it pumped the last two bear markets, and we can see that right here. So there's always 4-year cycles. So we have to go 4 years back into the last cycle, 2022. July Bitcoin went up 16-70% almost. And then 4 years ago, 2018, Bitcoin went up almost 21%. And yes, 4 years ago, I'm of course, I'm gonna discuss it, Bitcoin went down almost 10%. But the last two times Bitcoin went up, and overall Bitcoin was generally very positive in July, followed by August, September, 2022, last bear market. We went down 2 consecutive months. 2018, the bear market before, we also went down 2 consecutive months. And have a look at this, 2014, we also went down 2 consecutive months. On top of this, right now we had May and June down, right? But same thing happened last bear market. May and June were down, followed by a positive July, and then a dump in August, September. 2018, May and June were down, just like right now. 21% up in July. This is like the final pump, the final trap, if you want to say it, in this bear market. The final trap, and then the big capitulation event, the next 2 months, find that bottom in that bear market, and we go up. And if you look at Bitcoin on a monthly, I'm showing this chart many times, but this is basically summing up everything that you need to know. I mean, look, Bitcoin usually goes down from the top to the bottom for approximately 365 days. And then it goes up from the bottom to the top for approximately 3 years, approximately 1,065 days. And usually the top is somewhere in Q4. It's here, in 2017 it was in December, in 2021 it was in November, and then last year it was of course in October, 5th of October. And if you go from the top to the bottom, it's 365 days. And then we have that bottom Q4 the next year. So here we had the bottom in November 2018 after a peak in December 2017. Here, peak in November 2021. So a year later, we had that bottom in November 2022. And if history repeats, we had the peak in October 2025. The bottom should be somewhere in October 2026. So 2 or 3 months to go, and we'll find that bottom for Bitcoin. And if I go back on the weekly, and let's just keep these lines here because it's easy to look at, and I actually put the moving average, this is the 200 weekly moving average line, we can see that historically, whenever we approach this 200 weekly moving average, it's a very good time to buy into DCA, into Bitcoin. And we can see that right here. I mean, this is the same chart. Whenever we approach that 200 weekly moving average, if you just dollar cost average, if you buy Bitcoin every 2 weeks, every month, every week, and just add to your position around about this time, end of, in Q4 after the peak, like we just said, a year after the peak, when we're close to the 200 weekly moving average line, you're getting very good entry prices for that upcoming bull market. Now keep in mind, the upwards move is less and less every time. Here, 2014, 2015, we went up 9,300%. Then the next pump to the upside, I mean, it was basically because of COVID. We had during the bull market, we went down and retested the 200 weekly, but we went up over 1,000%. Last cycle, we went up 700%. So I can see a clear trend, right? The gains are becoming less, but also the losses are becoming less and less. So I think we can go to like make a new all-time high at least, because we always create new all-time highs in bull markets. You can see this right here. The all-time high was here at like $1,100 in 2013. Next all-time high was at $14,000 in 2017. The next all-time high was of course at $69,000 approximately. That was the last time. And then this all-time high was $126,000. So we go up more and more every single time. So I think we can go to close to 200,000, something like that, in that ballpark. The important thing is it takes 1,064 days from the bottom to the top. The price itself is not that important. So best thing to do, dollar cost average somewhere around this bottom range, and then wait for 3 years and then sell and like dollar cost average out of the position in those final few months. Just keep selling some and some Bitcoin over time. Now let's quickly dive into Bitcoin here on a shorter time frame, and let me put the candlesticks back on. Look, what I think will happen, I mean, we know that July usually is very bullish, and we broke out of this falling wedge pattern, which usually has a target at the top of the range. So I think we will reach by end of this month around about close to $70,000, $67,000 to $70,000. That's where I would also enter small short positions to then benefit from this move to the downside for Bitcoin, of course, in August and September. Now, along the way, however, I think we can go a bit down. So right now, I think we can go to retest that $61,000 level and then pump to 70 and then have that big move down, grab this liquidity here at like $57,500, and we continue moving down, making a lower low eventually, like we just discussed, right? We will create a lower low for Bitcoin and it will bring us down to like the 50s in that ballpark. And a reason why we might be going down soon is because the expectation for interest rates are now that we have actually a 51% chance of an interest rate hike. Currently, the target for interest rate is 3.5 to 3.75% interest rates. And we used to have very high expectations that they will remain the same. But we have now a 51.5% chance that in the next FOMC meeting, the interest rates will actually be increased by 25 basis points. And this is of course bearish for the markets, especially for risky assets like Bitcoin, like gold. It is not good for the markets. And this aligns perfectly with the idea that in September, if we have that rate hike, we have that big move to the downside for Bitcoin as a result of this. And then October, we find that bottom for Bitcoin, and that's when we buy. So basically, that's what I think will happen. We can move down a bit, grab this liquidity, which I just mentioned, right? Grab it here at $61,000, then move back to the upside for Bitcoin, retest this falling wedge pattern here, also laying at around $67,000 to $70,000, move to the downside, and that is it for Bitcoin really. If I look here at the 21 weekly moving average, also we can see that we usually retest it in a bear market. And that is a time when we retest it and then have that big move to the downside. Right here, 2018, we had that pump in July, retested the 21 weekly moving average line, and then we went to the downside. 2022, last bear market, also, we didn't quite touch it, but we went close to the 21 weekly, and then end of July, beginning of August, we started going down again. So right now the 21 weekly is sitting around about $69,700, about $70,000. Of course, this updates on a weekly basis. So once the new week starts, this number will go slightly down because the trend is of course going down. But that's what I think will happen. We'll retest this line, have that final push to the downside, and that is it really for Bitcoin. And let's have a quick look at the Wyckoff method. So Wyckoff, he basically has this prediction that markets move in a certain way. And surprisingly, it is quite accurate. And what is basically predicting is that we have phases of accumulation and distribution. And right now, if we follow the Wyckoff pattern, he's also predicting that here we are right now. Here we'll have that move to the downside, retesting this liquidity at like $61,000. Then a move to the upside, which I think will happen by the end of the month, right? Retest that $70,000 region. And then we start going down, find that bottom somewhere in October, and we start going up from there. Have a look at Wyckoff if you like. And we discussed that best thing to do is buy Bitcoin along these levels right here. And that is it really for the video. So I want you guys to just pay attention, stay a bit relaxed here for like a month or so, and then we can start dollar cost averaging. Let's wait for that big pump, push down to the downside below $60,000, below the previous support here. And then I think it's a good time to really dollar cost average and benefit from this upcoming bull market. With that being said, see you guys tomorrow and bye.